Welcome to Chapter 4. This would be the heart and soul of the matrix of bass, and there's a lot going on in here, so if you haven't been paying attention up till now, it's a good time to start. Now you can check with your certified and bonded musician, but in the matrix of bass, an interval is simply the finger spacing on the fretboard between any two notes. Any two and all two notes will have an interval relationship, and as you will soon see, intervals are both logical and predictable, and I know, it would be great if you could say the same about your significant other. I know. As you know, each mode only has 8 notes, and when we're practicing our intervals, only those 8 notes can be used in whatever mode we're practicing. And practicing intervals is a lot of work, but it's way better than rearranging your sock drawer, and it needs to be done. And the payoff is intervals have enormous practical application in all forms of music, and it would behoove you to spend equal amounts of time with all of them. In the matrix of bass, we use the term traditional in an untraditional way. If I say that an interval has a traditional relationship, the finger spacing on the fretboard is exactly the same as it is determined in the mother mode. Remember, the mother mode is right, and whatever the interval relationships are there is what they should be. That being said, if an interval has a sharp, you'll simply take your second finger and move it up 1 fret. If an interval has a flat, you'll just take your second finger and move it down 1 fret. With this information in hand, and no pun intended, here is a traditional third. And this also would be a traditional third, and that would also be a traditional third, because as you know, and now that you know your fretboard, there are multiple thirds up and down the neck, and knowing where they are is exceedingly helpful when doing intervals. That being said, let's do the intervals of thirds in the mother mode. Here they are, please learn them. When it comes to learning the intervals of fourths, they're a lot easier than learning the intervals of thirds. And why? That's because we start using the exception theory that I had mentioned earlier. In the matrix of bass, we focus on the exceptions in the modes instead of trying to learn all the rules. And this is very applicable in the fourths. And what I mean by this is a traditional fourth. That's what it is right there. In all 7 modes, when you're practicing your fourths, you'll use that exact fingering spacing all the way up the neck until you come to one exception. And when that one exception happens, all you do is simply sharp the second finger, and that will, in essence, keep all the notes exactly the same as they are in the mother mode. It's an easy way to learn fourths, and I'm looking forward to you doing that. Now that you are into the intervals, I'm sure you realize that things change. When it comes to modes, they never change. They are always the same. They are defined. When you're practicing your intervals for the specific mode, well, they have to change, so all the notes in the intervals will line up with the notes in the mother mode. And when it comes to learning the intervals of fifths, it's great because much like the fourths, there's only one exception. And the best thing about it, in the Ionian mode, that exception doesn't happen until you reach the seventh note of that mode, whatever key you're in. Remember, this applies to all keys. But when you reach that seventh step, all you have to do is flat the fifth. And by flatting the fifth, all the notes will be exactly the same as they were in the mother mode. And does this have any practical application? Of course it does. It's huge because when you're jamming with the band, and you've been grooving on the same thing for a little while, and you want to spice it up, no matter what key the song is in, you know your fifths, you just rip up the fretboard, hitting the traditional fifth position until you reach the seventh, and then you just flat that fifth, and you look like a superstar, and it's just numbers, and it's awesome. When it comes to learning the intervals of sixth, they're more challenging, and I don't know why. The theories are exactly the same. Maybe it's because we start skipping strings. For whatever reason, when I was learning them, they were just hard. The best advice I can give you is just remember this. The way they are in the mother mode is the way they are supposed to be. That's what it is. And in the future, we will be talking about comparisons to the way it's supposed to be. But for me, it just didn't feel natural. But that's the way it is. It mathematically works, and you really need to learn them. Why do you really need to learn them? Because they are really cool. When you play the six intervals in live settings, you're going to raise some eyebrows. When it comes to learning and practicing your intervals of sevenths, you will likely start hearing familiar sounds. And why is that? Well, that's because good musicians practice their intervals, and good musicians will put the intervals of sevenths into a lot of their songs. Why? Because it's a really cool interval. What is also really cool is learning the intervals of sevenths is relatively easy. This is what a traditional seventh would look like, and this is what a flat seventh would look like. In all seven modes, there will only be 2 traditional sevenths, and there will be 5 flat sevenths. In the matrix of bass, we try to focus on the easiest number. We love easy in the matrix of bass, and it's easier for us to focus on the 2 traditional 7ths as opposed to the 5 flat 7ths. So yes, the 5 flat 7ths would be the exceptions, but they're not really the exceptions. You know what I'm talking about. What you need to do is just practice your 7ths, enjoy them, and this is what they sound like. Perhaps you're sitting there right now saying, this matrix of bass thing, it's a hunk of junk. Dude's crazy. Hasn't he ever heard of like a 9th chord or a minor 13th chord? Well, as a matter of fact, I have heard of them. They're really cool, and wouldn't you know, I have a very simple mathematical formula to figure it out. Before I talk about that, I just want to talk about why no one ever talks about modes. The reason why no one talks about modes is because guitar players and keyboard players, they're using specific notes, and they need to be very specific. As bass players, we're just the foundation, and we only need those essential numbers. And what we can do is, yes, play those essential numbers, but every once in a while you sneak in that magic color number and you just change the whole song. It's awesome.